Good morning again. The only constant in life is change. Change alone is unchanging. We've all heard that bit of wisdom from Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher. Yet somehow many of us have spent a good amount of time resisting or denying that truth. After all, we're used to our current situation, our current place in life. Being used to it, we feel we can manage it, more or less, at least most of the time. And who wants change if it's going to bring on more challenges? Though all of us will have many challenges to manage during the course of our lifetimes, there are probably only two that we all share in common. All of us were born, and all of us will die. What did you do to prepare to be born? I confess I can't remember myself. Everything was outside of my control. I did not have a single thought, much less a plan. I had to count on my mother's plan, the plan of the pediatrician, the preparation of the doctor and staff in charge of the delivery, the healthcare system. If they had not made adequate plans, where would I have been? Not here, 70 plus years later, I bet. As for death, that other polarity, there'll be more to say on that subject later in this talk. The most important of our transitions are marked by ritual. Those are the ones usually we look forward to. In Christian churches, there are baptisms and christenings. In the Jewish tradition, the male baby is subject to a bris. Roman Catholicism ritualizes 7 passages: baptism into the faith, one's first confession, a ritual penance for sin, marks the onset of the age of reason, the sacrament now referred to as reconciliation. One's first Holy Communion follows that first confession, as the soul is believed now to be purified and worthy of the sacrament. Confirmation marks the full ratification of one's commitment to the faith. A wedding marks entrance into the sacrament of holy matrimony. If a Catholic man chooses to become a deacon of a church or enters the priesthood, that milestone is marked by a ceremony recognizing the holy orders. As a young Catholic myself, I was taught that the approach of death was also marked sacramentally with a rite called extreme unction. Now, anointing the sick is the name of that sacrament, and it's not reserved for the dying only, but to comfort anyone in substantial need. In our own tradition, we mark transitions such as welcoming the newborn into the spiritual community by way of a baby dedication, offering a bridging ceremony to youth as they move from high school into the next stage of their lives, celebrating marriages and ordinations and memorial services. We celebrate an ingathering Sunday with a water communion and the close of the church year with a flower communion. Of course, many of our life transitions occur outside of church life. A child enters kindergarten or pre-K to start his or her education, stepping out of the safety of the home into a new and strange land of socialization. That same child will, in most cases, graduate from elementary school, then high school, and often college. Some will graduate with advanced degrees. Each of us will get our first job and our first real job, and what will seem like a lifetime away at the time, our retirement. For some, there will be transitions to assisted living facilities and or nursing homes. In time, there may be a transition to a hospice. And for all of us, the transition from all we know of life to all we don't know of death. All of these transitions will require a certain amount of planning, of mental preparation, and sometimes of ritualized acceptance. I'll share a personal story with you, one which may lay out a template as you strategize to move from one uncertain stage of your life to another more certain stage. I faced a particularly challenging transition in 1993. I had quit my job as an English teacher at Sacred Heart High School in Kingston in order to be grandfathered into the requirements for certification for teaching secondary school English. Once I had completed those requirements, I found that the bottom had dropped out of the job market. I managed to secure an interview here and there, but finally had to settle for substitute teaching while I continued to look. At the same time, my living situation, sharing a 2-bedroom apartment in Jamaica Plain, was no longer working out. My apartment mate had lost his job working with intellectually challenged youth in a residential setting for disrespectful or abusive behavior, and wanted to slide for a while on rent payments. Arguments ensued, and I had to ask him to depart. But now I had to figure out how to pay the rent on my own and what my next steps might be. I could place an ad on one of the local papers to look for another housemate, but I'd just been burned, and I didn't want to invite that to happen again. I could look for another living situation. I could take a full-time job that would pay the bills but would derail my career path, which started fairly late as it was. I was stuck. I asked the minister at the Jamaica Plain UU church that I'd been attending for the previous 4 years if I could place a notice in the weekly bulletin stating that I was looking for a housemate or a job, or both. And Terry Burke graciously agreed. As it happened, one of the church members was an administrator at Volunteers of America, which ran a number of programs in town, including a congregate living program for older adults. And McCrowan House was in need of a night manager. Would I be interested? Well, this certainly seemed like a step backward at age 41. Did I really want to admit to myself I was stuck in neutral? Leslie told me that the position required that I vacuum all the common areas and clean the shared bathrooms, of which there were 7. I'd have to mow the lawns, front and back and side, clear off snow from the steps and walkways, sidewalk and handicap ramp, and shovel out the 50-foot driveway in winter. And I would have to be on call for emergencies from 11 at night till 7 in the morning. In return, I'd get breakfast and dinner in a nice large room with a bed, microwave, fridge, and the pièce de résistance, 2 skylights. I said I'd have to think about it. Should I continue to stay in my apartment where I'd lived for 10 years and which I loved, or uproot myself, take on an opportunity to live rent-free, and possibly save some money if I could ever get a full-time job? As I mulled over these possibilities, a third option emerged. My mother offered me a room in her house in the Squantum section of Quincy, a lovely area, if a bit far removed from my usual haunts. I could store my belongings in the basement while I sorted things out. Talk about transitions. I didn't want anything to change, yet it seemed that I'd have to change or take another chance with a stranger as a housemate. What to do? Here's what I did, and I offer it as a strategy to you when you are faced with a number of options and baffled about how to proceed. I made a chart containing 3 columns. Stay where I was and look for someone with whom to share the rent. Take the position as night manager, move in with my mother. Then on the left side of the page, I made a list of the things I was looking for: privacy, security, proximity to public transportation in case my car broke down, meaningful responsibilities, freedom to come and go, proximity to church, opportunities for fellowship, options for being in nature. I gave each choice a point value, 1, 2, or 3, depending on how well I thought each would address those needs and desires. And I was surprised to find out how distant a third place was the option of living with my mother. Taking the night manager position was the clear winner. I gave Mrs. Hallisey my month's notice and made preparations to move. I ended up staying in that position for 4 years. When the program manager position opened up, I moved into it while the VOA searched for a permanent replacement. And that experience allowed me to apply for a position as case manager at Kit Clark Senior Services. And that turned out to be a satisfying 16-year position working with formerly homeless elders and disabled persons. And that was one of the things that led to the decision to enroll in divinity school. And that allowed me to become a parish minister. Who knows how things would have turned out otherwise? I had felt behind the 8 ball, but I devised a strategy that allowed me to make a well-reasoned decision, which, in a phrase, paid off. I again faced a transitional challenge as I was about to turn 66 years old, just about the official retirement age for collecting Social Security benefits for someone in my age cohort. And I've been asked to especially address that transition in today's sermon. I did not use the services of a retirement specialist, but a friend of mine in Bowling Green did, and was both surprised and pleased with the result. He said that he'd expected the bulk of the questions would be related to finances. How much money have you saved? What's the status of your investments? How liquid are your assets? What are your financial obligations? Do you have children who expect help paying off their student loans? And John said very little of the conversation circulated around these concerns. Instead, the questions were more along the lines of, what gives you satisfaction in life? How well do you manage your free time? What activities do you do that require physical stamina? Are there places that you'd like to travel? Will there be anything that will tie you geographically to the region once you've retired from your position? All good questions, but not what he'd expected. So employing the services of a retirement specialist might be something you should consider. Also, there are a number of good books on the subject. The always reliable What Color Is Your Parachute series publishes an edition subtitled Planning a Prosperous, Happy, and Healthy Future. One of the most important things to remember is that the central question is not, how will I keep busy? But as a blurb for Patrice Jenkins' book puts it, what will I do all day that will be meaningful, provide direction for my life, keep me engaged in society, and still be fun and rewarding? And that book is called What Will I Do All Day? During my brief 5-year retirement preceding my accepting the position at this church, these were the questions that predominated for me. Jail ministry and volunteering as a mentor at a local elementary school went a long way toward answering those questions, at least until the pandemic hit. After that, I spent a good amount of time on memoir writing, which was stimulating and felt productive and spurred me to reconnect with friends that I hadn't seen for years. But it really wasn't enough. Another title you might want to consider if retirement is on the horizon for you, especially if you are a so-called type A personality, has the provocative title, What the Hell Do I Do Now? And this was written specifically for those who tend to define themselves by their jobs. If you've devoted your life to an all-consuming profession, you might really find yourself thrown for a loss when you're presented with 16 waking hours of free time. Many are the tales of women driven to distraction by husbands whose agita gets the best of them as they wander through the house 6 or 7 days a week, sometimes making suggestions that aren't so helpful. In addition to providing a useful way to employ your time, A job or profession also has the advantage that it establishes a routine for the day. Without a vehicle to establish such a routine, you need to invent one yourself, which is a task in itself. Really, you have to set aside time to plan what your days will look like. Otherwise, you may tend to drift. One day will begin to seem pretty much like another, and your sense of meaning will dissipate. I recently spoke with a man who retired from a demanding but satisfying position after several decades and found himself adrift, with so much time at his disposal. He recognized that there was a shortage of teachers in the community, and he applied to be a substitute teacher in math. He so enjoyed the work, and the school system was so pleased with it, that he was offered and accepted a part-time job teaching math to middle schoolers. And he was in a position to resist the pleas of the administration that he moved to full-time. He's doing just what he wants, and he's glad to know that he's still making a contribution. Using your time well in retirement is key to continue to find meaning in your life. But a time will come, if we live long enough, that our energy level and sometimes the soundness of our mental faculties will press upon us the need for another transition to an assisted living facility or a nursing home. Will we be prepared to face that challenge, or will we resist it with all our might, the changing reality of our mind and body? It will take real emotional maturity to admit that the sure decline that happens to others will happen to us as well. It's happening even as I speak, perhaps. What then? Have you established a healthy enough relationship with sons and daughters or younger siblings to initiate a discussion about options? Or respond appropriately if loved ones bring up the subject? Do you have a minister or counselor you can speak with who might be able to help you work through obstacles, physical, mental, and spiritual? Resources exist right here in the church if you choose to use them. Many of our church members have negotiated this challenge for a spouse, or parents, or even for themselves. I'm sure we could pull together a support group or transitions group if it was requested. And what about the final transition? Have you made plans for your memorial service, the dispersal of your property, the destination of your remains? Have you composed a will, chosen an executor? Does a loved one know where to find the document? These are not things that most of us enjoy talking about, but it's a mark of love for your family and descendants to put such plans in place. There are law firms even within walking distance that can guide you through that process. When you are a member of a spiritual community, you should never feel like you have to do it all by yourself. We need one another when we would mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another in the hour of our success. We need one another in the hour of defeat. We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. Thank you to George E. Odell for those words.